Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist is here, and in my opinion, it's the first great game of 2025. I was a big fan of its predecessor, Ender Lily, so when Ender Magnolia was announced for early access in 2024, I was determined to pick it up and watch the game grow as the year progressed. The problem was that after its release in March of 2024, there was only one update and then nothing else. At least that's what I see when I'm looking at Steam. I ended up playing through what was available during the early access period and was really looking forward to the final product because I was pretty impressed with the early chapters. I did have one small critique though, and it was directed at the game's difficulty because I felt it was a bit on the easy side. I was curious to see how the full game would scale in difficulty and complexity, and I won't lie, Ender Magnolia does a really good job of lulling you into a false sense of security. The opening areas, in my opinion, are really easy to get through, but they do allow the player to acclimate to the different gameplay mechanics and systems that make up the game. Once you get past the Shackled Beast, which is where the early access portion ended, the game starts to really show its teeth, and Ender Magnolia goes from really good to great. As a heads up, this video is going to feature spoiler footage. I am going to show late game bosses to include the final boss of the game, and I will showcase a number of different environments as well, so there is your warning. I think the one thing that really stood out to me when it came to Ender Magnolias was its level design, because it goes from something that's relatively simple, where you're just kind of clearing an area fairly quickly, you have all these different platforms that you can see, the areas aren't large, they're really small, and then eventually it transitions to these massive wide open spaces. And we're talking different teleportation devices, we're talking all these different levers you have to utilize, all these different puzzle rooms, and some require you to chain together different traversal mechanics to get to the next objective. The game really gets vertical near the end, especially when you arrive at the Arena Tower or the Sorcerer's Academy. I was really stunned to see how complex these areas were because the game starts off so simple. It's practically point A to point B stuff. Navigation was easy, life was good, and it really leaned toward a casual Metroidvania experience. I felt this way until I acquired the dive ability, and then I also got the wall climb ability shortly after that, and then I started to realize that this game was going to be more complex than what I was giving it credit for, and I knew I had to start taking exploration seriously. When this game began to really open up, I was constantly referring to my map to make sure I was going in the right direction, because Ender Magnolia does not play around. If you're thorough, the game is infinitely more manageable. If you're too quick or inattentive for whatever reason, you're going to get lost, and backtracking can be quite the grind. I recommend you mark areas on your map that feature new pathways or any of those areas that you think will open up in the future to prevent any headaches. I'm going to give an example really quick. There's a section of this game that requires you to go back to an area that was initially the site of a boss fight. When you first arrive here, you're prompted with an in-game cutscene, and the Chief of Tuner sends you up to the Upper Sanctum. Now, you're going to notice that there is a barrier present, but it feels like it's too out of the way, and by the time you head up and start exploring the Upper Sanctum, which includes the factory, the academy, the arena, and more, it's going to be way out of your mind because you're busy and have other priorities like navigating these new complex areas and surviving all the new dangers because enemies are just gonna beat your ass. After I had gotten done with exploring, I had hit a wall, and for the life of me could not figure out where to go to next until I decided to head back down to where I met the Chief of Tuner, where I was promptly thrust into a boss fight, and this gave me more information on where to go next. Ender Magnolia rarely holds your hand, and that's 100% true. You're gonna get like really vague hints sometimes, and it's no longer about how quickly you can traverse these areas, but how thorough you can be. If there is a clouded spot on your map, make sure you check it out. Leave no stone unturned, otherwise you're gonna find yourself locked out of the final section, which, as a level, is both fantastic and also a pain in the ass to navigate because enemies are ruthless, and if you haven't found any of the crystals to increase your health, you will get two-shotted. Or maybe one-shotted, just depends on how low your health is. Don't worry about your health bar reaching the mini-map. That's a good thing. I can't tell you how many times I died looking for a respite in the final section, but I just know it was a lot. I died way too many times to hazards, elite enemies, and a mini boss that could counter your attacks with an explosive ability that can melt your entire health bar. I think around the 5th attempt, I got tired of working at a distance and just started to stay close and attacked. I don't know what made me change up this strategy, but it ended up working out for me. The final stage area is a testament to Ender Magnolia's understanding of how to scale and to really challenge the player. I really feel like the boss fights try to do this, but it's honestly kind of a mixed bag. Now, that doesn't mean I hated the boss fights, because I really did enjoy them. And I really think this is my only critique of the game, because you go from having fights that are relatively simple, and then you have those other fights that are difficult, but they're not difficult because of the different phases. They're difficult because the damage output can be extreme. It's really like the scaling is all out of whack once you start encountering enemies outside of the earlier chapters. There were a few times that I honestly thought I was in the wrong area because I was getting absolutely destroyed by bosses. And it really forced me to change tactics. Like, I became very much dodge heavy. And this wasn't really a problem in the lower sanctum, as I rarely died to any of the bosses in this game because I think you're pretty well equipped to handle these encounters. Your homunculi come with different abilities, and these are designed to overwhelm and break an enemy's defense when used in conjunction with one another. Most bosses early on can feel really trivial because of these abilities, and you're just going to kind of breeze right through and feel really overpowered. And sure, a bit of dexterity is required to ensure that you're constantly using abilities to do the most damage possible, but most of these bosses are readable and some just lack aggression. And then you get to the upper sanctum, and this is where the game starts to really spike in difficulty and fights become far more engaging. There's all these different projectiles and attacks being thrown all over the screen. And listen, these are still readable, but you can no longer trade blows. Your margin of error shrinks considerably. And even with certain equipment, and this includes totems and other defensive centric relics, you can be killed in 1 or 2 attacks. You can no longer be lazy with your dodges or with your openings. Bosses will make sure you have no time to breathe, and if you aren't aggressive when these opportunities appear, you will die. It really is a stark contrast from the opening sections of the game, but regardless, even with the increased damage output, it really felt like some bosses were just harder than others, and it kind of didn't make any sense because my expectation was that we were going to consistently scale in boss fights, but that's not really what happens. So I would go into like a factory, and I would fight a boss that would just give me all types of trouble. It would kill me in 1 or 2 shots, and if one of their status effect attacks hit me, then I'm spending more time running away, trying to recover, than I am doing damage. And this is the type of boss where you can't break their defense down, so you can't stagger them at all, and you have to be aggressive in this fight. Otherwise, you are going to die. That's just how that works. You're going to be back as the respite as soon as the fight begins. Now, I wasn't really expecting this level of precision from this game because it never prepares you for it, but then I go on after this fight to a new section and I encounter the main antagonist, Gilroy, for the second time, and here I'm going to refer to him as Gary from now on because he's an administrator, and this fight was super easy. This happens multiple times, by the way, where you're just kind of roaming through and you're going to fight bosses that look super imposing and they're going to be really easy, and they're going to fight a boss who just looks like they're just kind of there as a mid-boss, and they'll beat the absolute crap out of you, and it's just all very jarring, even if those fights ended up being a lot of fun. This game really wants you to experiment with the different homunculi, and I really love this because each of them serve a purpose, and being able to overwhelm bosses and enemies is a nice power trip. You just can't get too greedy in the late game because while you'll get some easy looking bosses, they will absolutely kill you in one shot with a move you just weren't expecting. I want to get back to that factory boss. Its name is Velgrind, and this boss took my stubborn ass an hour because I refused to use a certain homunculi that I acquired that really ended up trivializing the fight. I wanted to beat this boss straight up with Nola because I had this upgraded axe and I was swinging so much faster, and this thing was amazing, And I just felt like I could beat them with this new upgrade. But in this fight, I was getting one-tapped by an attack that essentially saw Velgrin lift both their arms up and swipe down. You have to be really precise with your timing, otherwise you're going to die. And I felt like that dying to that multiple times really stopped being fun after a while. And usually when I play Souls-likes or Metroidvanias, I want to assess the threat of an enemy by getting up close. But when you're watching your bar just completely disappear after one hit, it makes you question yourself and your life choices. And I really do question the scaling in the late game because it is jarring. And even with the damage output being out of whack, I will say this though about these fights, none of them are unfair. It's just weird to go from being able to survive a critical strike to dying in one hit. Outside of that, though, I think Ender Magnolia is a fantastic Metroidvania that surprised me with its depth in combat and the complexity of its level design. It really is a step up from the original. I do wish, though, that the story wasn't so dependent upon beating certain bosses, because this is where you're going to get a lot of important exposition. You're going to get a cutscene. It's going to be really cool. But if you happen to, like, get lost while exploring an area, you're probably going to forget what you're doing. You're going to probably forget what's going on in the narrative. And that happened to me a few times because at one point, I just sat at a respite to watch memories to make sure that I was getting the most out of the narrative because it had been so long since I had seen a cutscene. And I honestly forgot what I was doing. Now, Ender Magnolia does come with two endings. The second one, which I did get on my first playthrough, is surprisingly easy to achieve. You just need to be thorough when exploring the academy and make sure that you take every chance to explore underwater areas, even those that have blighted waters that will do heavy damage to you. There's your hint. So before I end the video, I want to talk about my favorite moment in this game, and it was the final boss fight. I won't lie, Gary makes for a fantastic final opponent, and he totally makes up for his other fights too, which I felt were kind of underwhelming. It really didn't make him seem imposing. This final boss fight, though, is absolutely awesome. He has multiple phases and has some really amazing attacks when those phase shifts occur. And this is not an unfair fight by any means. His attacks are readable, even if they cover nearly the entire screen. I think I died once at least to every new face because I was not expecting a big sword to kill me, or for him to hit the ground with so much force that it caused a massive explosion, and then it was followed up by energy geysers. I didn't expect Gary to go all Terry Bogard from Fatal Fury, but I'm all for it. This fight is fast, and it allows you to use whatever homunculi you want and whatever abilities you want. I really love this fight. I didn't really care about dying. It was just epic. The music was great, and it was a satisfying end to what was a fantastic journey. Sure, there are small blemishes to be found in Ender Magnolia. No game is perfect after all, but this fight was not one of them. It's just great from start to finish, and I had a blast. It capped off a very strong experience, and I can't recommend this game enough, and it definitely is a worthy sequel to Ender Lilies, like I said before, and was worth the wait even though there weren't updates in early access. It really made up for all that waiting I was doing. Like, I would check this every 3 months to see if like something had occurred with this game. I was like, so when do I get the next chapter? When is something happening? And then, you know, I just waited for the full game to release. Now, we don't do scores here on Pixelated Thoughts, but if I did, it's a 9.8 or something arbitrary because I want to make you guys mad. If they fix the damage scaling, we'll talk about it because I really think this game is fantastic and I don't really have any major issues with it. So do yourself a favor if you're a Metroidvania fan. Go out, pick up Ender Magnolia, and have a really good time with it. Because that is going to do it for this video. If you happen to like the content, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Ken from Pixelated Thoughts. I'll talk to you next time.